welcome everybody to the North Alabama Civil War Roundtable. I know we got some guests here tonight. We're glad to have you. And if you get time, make sure you come up here and sign in. We'd like to know how many people are here to meetings. And also, if anybody wants to pay dues, we're also accepting dues. Cody Engdahl, who is our guest speaker tonight, is from Nashville. He is a historian, and he's written 3 books, a trilogy, on the 2nd Michigan Cavalry. The 2nd Michigan Cavalry, you may or may not know, were right here in this area. And did a lot of skirmishing and fighting right here. Matter of fact, they're mentioned in his last book, which is on the Battle of Nashville and the Retreat, and the Battle of Franklin. He's got 3 books up here. One is about Island Number 10. The second one is about the Battle of Perryville. And the third one is, of course, the Battle of Nashville. And he's got a 4th one's going to be coming out. It's actually going to be a prequel, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And anyway, I met Cody about a year or so ago, I think, at one of the Civil War shows.
That's right.
Up in Franklin, and then I also met him over in South Haven. And he is also an accomplished fiddle player, or a violinist, whatever you want to talk. I asked him one time, what's the difference in a violin and a fiddle? He may tell us that. But anyway, we're going to have a special talk tonight, and we're going to learn about the Civil War through fiddle tunes. Cody, without further ado,
Thank you very much.
It's yours.
And so I just moved the seat. Sorry. The go-to line for that is, it's a fiddle when you're buying it, but it's a violin when you're trying to sell it. That is the.
There you go.
Yeah, my name's Cody. I just real quick about myself. I am from Nashville by way of Detroit. I was born this way. My accent sounds a little bit like a dumpster fire in a back alley up in the north. That's why I sound the way I do. I wrote a trilogy. It follows the 2nd Michigan's career, the 2nd Michigan Cavalry, but I got heroes and villains on both sides. The trilogy follows a set of friends who go to private school together up in Detroit, and this is based off a true story of the 2nd Michigan. Their surgeon talked about this, that when the war broke out, there were a lot of kids from the South that were going to U of M and other universities up in Detroit. And when the war broke out, well, those kids had to drop out and go home to defend their homeland. So their friends from the north that they went to school with were like, this is a true story, they walked them to the train station. Well, first of all, they had a ball the night before, they had a big party, and then walked them to the train station the next day and said, hey, keep your head down, and like, don't worry about me, I'll be back in 6 months. Well, it turned out to be something much more than that. So I like that idea. So my characters are people that start together as friends, end up on opposite sides of the war, and through the trilogy go on their separate adventures, but at times their paths will cross. And I like the idea of honor amongst enemies, and what's more important, politics and geography, or friendships, family, love, and honor. So that's pretty much on that. And all the my characters are fictional, but all the battles, all the historical aspects, and the historical figures like Nathan Bedford Forrest, those are all portrayed as we know the best we know with our modern history today. So enough with the commercial. So you guys are like, all right, here comes this fast talking Yankee coming down here, trying to sell us his books about the 2nd Michigan Cavalry. So I always like to start off with a little medley, just to let you guys know where my heart is. Thank you, everybody, for coming down tonight. It'd be really weird if I was here by myself. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So, yeah, I always like to start off with kind of like a medley of both the anthems, and then play our anthem that we all share together. So,
Hey, that first medley you played really brought back some memories of the famous Ken Burns PBS documentary on the Civil War.
And I'm not playing every tune from there, and I'm playing some tunes that wasn't in that program, but I use that program a lot. I got the whole track list. I'm like, I'm going to be able to play every one of these tunes. That's what I do. Yeah. So I'm going to play for you another one of the another anthem, and this is an early one for the Confederacy. And I try, because I do a lot of these shows. I do it for roundtables. I do it for Sons of Confederate Veterans. I do it for Sons of Union Veterans and book clubs. So I try to play it right down the middle as much as I can. So we're going to jump over to the Confederate side. Now this is an early tune. A lot of you may know it's called the Bonnie Blue Flag.
Oh, yeah.
And so the Bonnie Blue Flag is, a lot of you know, is a very early flag for the Confederacy. It's a big blue field with a single white star in the center. Now the tune is actually an old Irish jig called the Irish Jaunting Car. And it was, and a jig is a dance tune. And to tell you the difference between a jig and what we play a lot here in America, which are like reels and marches. Marches and reels are in 2/4. So they're like, if it's a march, it's 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2. So you can march to. If it's a reel, it's the same thing but faster, because you can dance to 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2. Jigs are in 6/8, which sounds kind of complicated, but think about this. It's still 2 beats, but that beat, instead of 1 and 2, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And that gives it that kind of rollicking that sound. Now, this tune is played a lot. It was played a lot in the Civil War, especially by the Confederates. There was a man named Harry McCarthy, and he was an Irish immigrant, and he came over to America, and he settled in the South and became he was a champion of the Southern cause of the Confederacy. So he wrote the lyrics that we know as the Bonnie Blue Flag, and I don't know all the lyrics. It's something like, "We are a band of brothers, native to the soil." Yeah, I bet some of you guys know this. A lot of bands play in more like a march, like 2/4, especially if you go to some of these old-timey jams. I'm going to give it a little bit more of the Irish feel to it. So here we go. The Bonnie Blue Flag. The Confederates weren't the only ones that requisitioned old Irish tunes for propaganda purposes. The North did it too. And I'm going to play for you a tune that most people today know as Bonaparte Crossing the Rhine. And this is an old Irish tune. Now, if you can imagine, Bonaparte may have been an enemy of Britain and England, but he was apparently Catholic, and the Irish loved anybody who was killing redcoats, so they were very happy about it. So this is a happy tune when Bonaparte started taking his armies of republicanism and eventually of empire across the Rhine and invaded Germany. The Yankees repurposed this song and they call it Sherman's March to the Sea. So here is Sherman's March to the Sea, or Napoleon or Bonaparte Crossing the Rhine. Here we go. All right, so the next tune, I'll tell you this, how many people here own a pickup truck? Actually, I don't, but okay, how many? Okay, so
Small.
they always say, don't own a pickup truck if you don't want to help people move. And, and that's why I don't own one. You can't put anything in a Toyota Prius, especially a compact one. Well, if you play the fiddle or the violin, you're probably, there was a violinist here? Yeah, so you've probably been asked to play people's weddings. Oh, you play the violin, why don't you play the violin? So I'm gonna play you a tune that I play, when people ask me to play weddings, I'm like, okay, that's fine. I'm not really a classical violinist, so I'm not gonna play like the stuff that, I'll play Here Comes the Bride, I can do that. But you're not gonna get the kind of stuff, I'm gonna play more fiddle stuff, but I'm gonna play pretty stuff. And this is a tune that I play a lot because it's pretty. But I never tell them the title because it's a beautiful melody. It's got a very ugly name.
Really?
It's called Old Piss. It's called Old Piss. And it's a very popular fife and drum tune from Pennsylvania. And there's a lot of speculation of how it came about that name. And what a lot of people think is that there was it was used as a marching tune for one of the regiments. And they, the men called the colonel, who was kind of an honorary guy, they called him Old Piss and Vinegar. And this is his tune and his, for his boys. So I play it at weddings, I just don't let the bride's mother know that. You know, they're like, they got a list, and I don't put, you know, I think there's another name I've seen associated, it's called A Few Days. And so I kind of like to think of, like, you're going off to war, and you're like, yeah, we're going off to war, but hopefully in a few days it'll be all over, and we'll be going home. So
I thought it could have been an old horse.
Old horse?
You know, old piss, you know, a horse.
I don't know, think of an old horse when I play it, see if it works. All right, there we go. Gotta find my A. Would you let that be played at your daughter's wedding? I mean, I'd skip it if you wanted me to.
It was a nice sounding song.
Thank you very much. I think it's very pretty. All right, I'm going to play another regimental. We're going to jump back over to the Confederate side. So and I tell you, I like this song a lot. This is the Yellow Rose of Texas. Now I will tell you that I told you the title of it, and I'm going to start playing it, and you're going to be like, I don't quite remember it that way. Well, I play, what you probably are familiar with is the Gene Autry version that I think came out in the late 30s. And he kind of cleaned up the melody and made it nice and changed the lyrics and everything like that. It's an old minstrel tune. And back in the mid-19th century, they used to call people that were of mixed race, black and white, they would call them yellow-skinned. And because to them, those people had caramel colored skin, so they were called yellow people. And there was an old minstrel tune about the Yellow Rose of Texas being a beautiful mixed race woman that he's going to go back to Texas so he can go see her. And it became associated with the legend of Emily West, and became a theme song for the Texan War of Independence. Emily West was a real person, but she's kind of shrouded in mystery. We don't know a whole lot about her. And some of the story, a lot of the story is legend, some of it's true. We know that Emily, we think she was born probably in Boston, born a free woman, and lived in New York City. At some point, she took a deal, an indentured servitude deal, in which she went out to Texas to go work at a hotel out there. And during that time is when the Texas uprising happens, and she is captured by Mexican cavalry. And now there's a lot of different stories and legends. One of the legends is that she's a beautiful woman, and Santa Anna, General Santa Anna, was never going to pass up on a beautiful woman. So the legend is that she was his lover, and that he lost the Battle of Jacinto because they were together. And let's just say when the Texans attacked in the morning, he got caught with his pants down. Now, the other legend is: has anybody ever seen the TV series Texas Rising?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So the other legend is that she was a spy for the Texans, and she was definitely, well, according to this legend, she was also his lover, but she was feeding the Texans information, and that's why they were able. Apparently, Santa Anna, and he is in my 4th book, which is I'm writing right now about the Mexican War. He was very confident in his military skills, and so apparently before the evening of the Battle of Jacinto, he didn't really bother to. He figured, oh, we'll just get up in the morning and go kill the Texans. Well, they showed up, and that was the end of that for him. Yeah. So anyway, the other thing I'd like to say about this is that this tune has a lot to do with right where we stand right now. And it's in my book, Blood for Blood at Nashville. The 3rd part of that book is the whole Nashville campaign. And it starts with Hood, General Hood crossing the Tennessee River right here. And they had to build a pontoon bridge to get across. And actually what they did is they crossed over to one of the islands and then built a pontoon bridge over there. And the 2nd Michigan was the first Yankee unit to get out there to try to contest them, but they only had like a couple thousand men against 40,000 Confederates. And so the Confederates were able to bring up their artillery and just kind of push the Union cavalry back and then build their bridges. And there's a scene, and this is in my book, and this is based on real history. Hood was missing a leg, missing an arm. And he had his arm, but it was no good. It was in a sling. And so he walks up onto his horse, and they have to help him up onto his horse, and then they took his crutch and tied it to the back of his saddle. And then he gets up on he starts leading his army across, and it begins to rain, and behind him there is a brass band playing. And as they're crossing the river, and it's like Caesar crossing the Rubicon, because it is on. And they played Dixie, and they played the Yellow Rose of Texas, but they played this version. So here we go. Texas. General Hood and his Texan boys. Okay, we're going to get into a little bit of the battles now. And one of the first battles, major battles of the war, is, as you guys all probably know, is the Battle of Manassas, or Bull Run, the first one. And it's a battle in which the Federals got their rear ends handed to them pretty harshly. And it was quite an embarrassing defeat for them, and I think also it was the first clue that this wasn't going to be over in 3 months, that we were going to be at this for a while. And the one thing I find kind of funny about it is that Manassas was not far from Washington, D.C. And so a lot of the people in D.C. thought, wouldn't it be a great idea? Whenever you start something that way, it's probably not a great idea. But wouldn't it be a great idea if we loaded up our picnic baskets and took our carriages out there and find a nice place up on the hilltop so we could watch the battle, kind of like as a Sunday football game. And I can only imagine them sitting out there on their blankets and having their little cakes and their little sandwiches, and they're watching. Like, oh, listen to that! And you can hear the crackle of the musketry, the boom of the cannons, and then all of a sudden they're like, yeah, look, hey, actually, here come some of our boys. They're coming this way. In fact, they're running this way. And that guy just dropped his gun. And hey, there's some more behind them, but holy cow, they're coming this way. And so what happened is that all these civilians, as the federal line broke and started running back to Washington, D.C., the civilians that came out there for their picnic were right in the way of the retreat line. And so it was an absolute disaster of all of them clogging the road, their carriages in the way, and it started raining, and their pets' heads were falling off. And so this song is called Abe's Retreat, and it's also known as Manassas, so I'll try not to screw this one up. Abe's Retreat. We'll get back to old Abe coming up pretty soon here. So I'm going to play another one for you. Now, did you notice that song kind of had kind of a dark, smoky feel to it? It's because it's not in a major key and it's not in a minor key either. It's actually what we call a modal key. Not to get too deep into musical theory. And basically, it's kind of a mix between the two. It's got a major third, but a flat seventh, and that's probably way too much that you need to know. but a lot of the old fiddle tunes and a lot of the newer bluegrass stuff likes to use that key. I think one guy, I can't remember his name, one guy calls it a mountain minor. I'm going to play no song in it, and I'm going to do a federal one. This is a very interesting story. So, in a little bit is in my second book, The Battle of, The Perils of Perryville. And so, in the late summer of '62, early fall, the Confederates realized that there was no federal army between them and almost all of Kentucky. and it was just left wide open. The Federals had moved up to Louisville, to lick their wounds, and the way was wide open for them. And so they decided that this would be a great time to go into Kentucky, because Kentucky was riding the line. There was a lot of pro-Confederates, a lot of pro-Unionists. Kentucky fed both armies with volunteers. And so they decided that if they could take Kentucky, they could instill their own governor, and there'd be 20,000 men ready to flock to their banner. And so they marched on Kentucky, and they took the capital and put their own governor in there. They brought 20,000 rifles to hand out to volunteers. And meanwhile, the small garrison in Cincinnati are panicking because there's nobody between them and 40,000 screaming rebels. And so a call goes out throughout the state of Ohio looking for volunteers to come and defend Cincinnati. And 15,000 men showed up to defend the city. But these weren't soldiers, at least not yet. These were men, these were farmers. You know, Ohio is very much a rural state. And the Yankee commander there kind of derided them and said, yeah, these aren't soldiers, they're a bunch of squirrel hunters. And you know how when people use like a derogatory term like deplorable, then you adopt it and you make it a badge of honor. So these men started calling themselves the squirrel hunters. And there's a famous painting, some of you may have seen it. It's called The Squirrel Hunters, and it shows this line of thousands of men, you know, just in their rural clothes, bringing their old flintlocks and their old squirrel guns and fowling pieces. So this is Squirrel Hunters, and it's in honor of the men who came to defend Cincinnati. Now, spoiler alert, the rebels never got that far. It was a feint. They ended up bumping into the Union Army at Perryville, both of them looking for water during a drought, and what ensued was the bloodiest and largest battle in Kentucky in recorded history. Now, the Native Americans might have had something big that we don't know about, but we haven't found the archaeological evidence. But this one was pretty big. So here we go, Squirrel Hunters. Play for you, I think, is probably the most popular song of the war. Up until this point, we've been going back and forth playing Confederate and Yankee songs. This one is something that would have been popular in both camps, and in fact, it was so popular that some of the Yankee commanders forbid it to be played. This is Home Sweet Home, and very interesting story. There's a couple stories that of this happening during the war. The one that I know of that we actually have men writing home first-hand accounts of it is after the Battle of, I get my battles mixed up. It was after the Battle of Fredericksburg, and both of the armies are camped along the Rappahannock for miles. And as you guys know, the Civil War wasn't like a video game where like you put a quarter in and you just blow away other soldiers, you know, every single day. You might spend a year and a half sitting around in camps before you fire a gun in anger. And so after the Battle of Fredericksburg, which was a particularly gruesome one, the armies sat idle along the Rappahannock, and the men got bored. And this is that famous time where, you know, the Rappahannock, there are a lot of fording places, you know, where you know, Billy Yank and Johnny Reb would meet each other and trade coffee for tobacco, trade newspapers, hand off letters to send home, those kind of things. One of the other things that would happen is that almost every regiment had a band. And just so you know, it wasn't so they could just rock out while they were killing other people. The bands were very important. They were for morale, but they were also like, they used drum calls and bugle calls to communicate to the men on the battlefield because you could hear them. Also, when you marched, you know, giving a good marching tune to set the pace would do that. But they would also play and entertain themselves. And a lot of the band members would play brass instruments, but they bring their fiddles, you know, for campfire kind of stuff. Fiddles were not official instruments, but there were a ton of them there. Because they're very light. And as you notice, I'm not plugged into anything. I'm not using any amplification, none of that. And I've done weddings in cathedrals with no mics, and I filled the whole place. Well, anyway.
The fiddle and the banjo was the most popular, I guess.
And my partner, I have a partner, and we play it together. Like, he's a banjo player. He plays old Fralin, Clawhammer stuff. And so the bands would have kind of like a battle of the bands, where like maybe the rebels would be playing something, and then the Yankees would try to play on top of them. And then eventually it turned into they would take turns. You know, they try to outdo each other and try to play their patriotic songs. And one night, the Federal band started playing Home Sweet Home. And the Confederate musicians, instead of trying to play on top of them or play something different, they started playing it too. And then men started singing, men on both sides of the river. And then soon, all along the Rappahannock, men in gray, butternut, and blue are singing Home Sweet Home. And according to one man who wrote home, he said he had never seen anything quite like it. He said that one moment, it was as if they forgot that they were enemies. So here we go. Home Sweet Home. That I started the story. Some of the Federal commanders banned the song in camp because every time it got played at night while the men were drinking and sitting around the campfire, they'd have desertions the next day. So they're like, stop playing that. And I think Lorena was another one. All right, so who here has seen the Ken Burns documentary? Oh, yeah. All right, so just like you can't own a pickup truck without having to move your friends, and you can't play the fiddle without playing people's weddings. If you're gonna play the fiddle and you're gonna go to Civil War events, everybody wants you to play. What do they want you to play?
A show can fiddle.
Yeah, it's like Stairway to Heaven for fiddlers. And now a lot of you probably know this already, but the tune was actually written in 1980 by Jay Unger. And he was at he's a famous fiddle player and tune writer.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I thought it was older than that.
Well, there's more to it though. He wrote it at a camp, and it was kind of like the last day of this camp, and they were all, for their final performance. But it's said that that it's inspired by an old Scottish lament, and it has kind of that, it's a waltz, it's in 3/4, but it feels more Scottish than it does that. And also, some people say that the melody is very close to Stephen Foster's Master in the Cold, Cold Ground. So I guess, even though it may not be authentically a Civil War tune, something like it could very well have been played at that time. So we're just going to save that it is, okay? And I'll tell you that it did it to me twice. The first time when I didn't know the whole story about the letter, and they I think it's in the first or second episode, and they play the tune, and they're reading the letter of this officer about, and he's telling his wife how much he loved her, and how much he loved the kids, all that stuff. And then the narrator comes out and just yanks the rug right up from underneath you, and he says, 2 days later, he would die. Fucking bawling my eyes out. So anyway,
That sounds sad, yeah.
thankfully I play it poorly enough that nobody ever cries. That second song is called Soldier's Joy, and I always like to put that at the end of Ashokan Farewell because it's happy. Ashokan Farewell is so sad. That tune is one of the first tunes I learned as a fiddle player, and it's a very old tune. It was played by both sides, not just of the Civil War, but of the American Revolution as well. It's an old tune that comes from the British Isles. And there's a lot of debate about what soldier's joy means. Some people say it's payday, some people say it's prostitutes, opium. I like to think of it as the end of war, because as much as young men can't wait to go to war, the next thing they can't wait for is to go home. And so, so as we're wrapping up, I'm gonna do 2 more tunes. So I always like to think that Soldier's Joy is them coming home. So we're gonna do before, as the war comes to its end, we have one more big casualty to talk about, and that is Abe Lincoln. The song is called Booth Shot Lincoln, and you can either play it fast and happy or slow and solemn. It just depends on what side of the Mason-Dixon line. I'll try to cut it down right down the middle, but this is Booth Shot Lincoln. Shoot him again. All right, so I'm going to play one last one. So the American Civil War, we still feel the scars of it today, absolutely. And it's really tough to work in this space, because when you're writing tunes and you're going to events and you're writing books, playing fiddle, because people are very, very emotional about it. I think 2/3 of a million people, soldiers died, and that's not including the millions that starved to death, lost their homes, lost everything. It was a horrible thing. It was a terrible growing pain for our country. I'm happy with the result in that we are one country today. I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud to be I'm happy that how welcomed I am being a filthy Yankee from the gutters of Detroit. How well, all those jokes you guys make is true. Like, nobody from the South retires up in the North. There's a reason why. There's a reason why we carpetbaggers. There's the one good thing that came out of it, regardless of every single combatant had his or her own, and there were some hers, had their own reasons why they picked up a rifle and went and fought, for sure. And for sure, a lot of people was because they're burning the farms and they're invading my state. But the one good thing that came out of the war, one of the end results, was that millions of our fellow Americans got their freedom. And even though it would take them a long time to get fully there, and some people say that we're still working on that today, the emancipation for millions of our fellow Americans was a great thing to make this truly a land of the free. So this song was written to commemorate that. It is called, and I'll tell you something too, it's a song that, it's a minstrel tune, and even though it had very good intentions, things that we said at one time, 50 years later, all of a sudden you can't say that anymore, even though it was supposed to be polite. So the lyrics can be a little, okay, but it is to celebrate the emancipation and freedom for our Black Americans. This song is called "The Kingdom Come, the Year of Jubilee." And also, if you watch Ken Burns, you'll recognize this tune. Hooray for freedom!